Fishing Magazine television series. This week we take you to Central Missouri for the 2001 Truman Pro-Am Bass Tournament. It's July and it's hot, but uncharacteristically, the fishing isn't. Will the Central Pro-Am anglers find a way to catch them? We'll find out right after this.
Hey, Marty.
If the Stewart were into bass fishing, she would no doubt tell you that standing timber is a good thing. But if she'd ever been to Missouri's sprawling Truman Lake, she'd understand that's not always true. Because at Truman, you can have too much of a good thing. Impounded in the 1970s, Truman has acres and acres of standing timber, and it might take you years to fish it all. That's just one of the problems faced by nearly 200 of Mid-America's best bass fishermen as they journey to Truman for the 5th stop on Central Pro-Am Association's 2001 Tournament Trail. As the Pro-Am anglers prepare for this mid-July event, they found conditions as tough as they've ever seen them. Fluctuating water levels have kept the bass from moving to their normal midsummer haunts, and where they'll be during this tournament is anybody's guess. Just ask Dave Barker, Central Pro-Am's all-time leading money winner and 2-time winner at Truman.
The lake has been falling about 10 inches a day for about 3 or 4 weeks now. And it's been up 10, 15, 18 feet high, and it's down getting very close to normal now, so that if the lake has seemed like it's kind of stabilized, but the fish have pulled to the main lake points, or that's where I'm finding them better than anywhere else. The fish seem to be scattered. I don't catch very many fish in one area. I catch one fish on one point, and then I have to fish 2 or 3 points and catch another fish. And most of the fish I've been catching on jigs, when usually I depend real heavily this time of year on plastic worms. But it seems like the jig bite is a lot better right now than the worm bite is.
Around Central Missouri, Roger Fitzpatrick is considered one of the best. He too expects this tournament to be tough.
You know, if I can catch a limit each day, I'll be very happy. It's been relatively tough in the tournaments. The weights are down up here. And when you get the number of boats out here on the weekends that we're going to have this weekend, it makes it a lot tougher. So my goal is to catch between 11 to 13 pounds a day. And I think that's going to go a long ways, if not be right there to win it.
The morning of day one dawns clear and bright. A beautiful summer day in Central Missouri. Unless, of course, you're bass fishing. Then the overnight cool front simply means the conditions that were already tough are going to be just that much tougher. Dave Barker knows about tough conditions on Truman, but he managed to win at Truman in 1998 when he wasn't able to establish a reliable pattern during practice. Then he won fishing a 10-inch plastic worm just off the creek channel. But today, he's moved in close to the bank in shallow water and is fishing a variety of lures. So far, the fish he's catching are all small, but he knows that with fishing as tough as it is, a limit will stand him in good stead. Brian Snowden and Cliff Soward are fishing isolated cover in the back of Sterrett Creek. So far, they've been catching a few bass on shallow-running crankbaits. But as they head farther up the creek, Soward decides to try a tube bait and begins pitching it directly into the cover. It doesn't take long for that choice to pay off. Immediately, Soward can tell it's a good fish and carefully works it back to the boat where Snowden stands ready with the net. And after a fish like that, it doesn't take Snowden long to decide that he's going to try the same tactics. Roger Fitzpatrick is fishing isolated deadfalls nearby. He knows that bites are going to be few and far between, so he works each brush pile carefully with a variety of lures. After trying a tube bait and a jerkbait, Fitzpatrick gets the strike he's been looking for on a crankbait. He works the bass out to deeper water where there's less chance of it breaking free, and finally pulls it in. Fitzpatrick realizes he's on a good pattern, so he works deeper around other deadfalls in the area. Finally, his persistence is rewarded. If he can keep this up and come in with a limit of solid keepers, he's certain to be among the day one leaders. Fred Barracks may have spent more days fishing Truman Lake than any man alive, and so he's a threat to win any tournament he enters here. He's already won 2 Central Pro-Am titles at Truman, and he'd like nothing better than to add a 3rd one this year. But he didn't have a good pattern established in practice, So far this morning, the bass aren't cooperating. Finally, he does connect, but he knows he'll have to have 4 more just like this one to stay in the running. John Kramer and amateur partner Mason Chambers are both off to a good start. Kramer has 2 solid keepers, and if he can keep this up, he's certain to be among the day 1 leaders. And as for Chambers, well, he's been fishing a medium-sized, fat-free shad, and so far, the results speak for themselves. When the Pro-Am anglers return to Bucksaw Point for the afternoon weigh-in, Steve Mintz takes the early amateur division lead with 7.95 pounds. Later in the first flight, Mason Chambers comes to the scales.
That's big bass right now in the amateur division. Put your hands together. 3 bass. One of the others just barely weigh 3 pounds. No, they don't. They weigh 4 pounds. 9.85 pounds. That's your new leader right now in the amateur division.
In the pro division, David Bailey takes the early lead with 7.05 pounds. A short time later, Steve Wilson comes in with this solid 5.5 pounder, but it's his only fish, and he can't overtake Bailey. Then, Roger Fitzpatrick comes to the scales.
He has the limit. Like I said, he normally comes in with them. It's going to take the lead, 7.05 pounds to lead, and that's gone. We'll get a picture here of this young'un. Oh, yeah, double figures. 12.20 pounds, 12.2. Get a couple of those fish out of there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's your leader right now in the pro division, Roger Fitzpatrick.
Later in the first flight, John Kramer jumps into contention with 3 bass that weigh a total of 8.85 pounds. But Lynn Sykes soon leapfrogs over Kramer into second place with a limit weighing 10.1 pounds. Then Dennis Dahlke comes to the scales.
Let me just ask you a question. You're not telling anything, just this. Did you have a chance to catch more like that?
No, I didn't.
Did you have any other keepers on?
No, I didn't.
You had 2 bites? That was it?
A couple maybe bites, but, little bluegill bites and what have you.
Well, if you're only going to catch 2, you caught the right 2. Good job, son.
When the second flight arrives, Troy Akins is one of the first to come to the scales.
How many we got today?
We got 5.
Second 5-fish limit to come in today. Oh, here we go. Looky here, looky here. Watch out, leader. 13.30 pounds. Get a couple of those fish out of there, Troy. That's your leader right now in the pro division, Troy Akins.
A short time later, Howard Buning challenges Akins' lead.
Leading the tournament, Troy Akins, 13.30 pounds. Is that right? Oh, looky here, looky here, looky here. Goodbye, Troy Akins. 14.95 pounds, mark it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Howard Buning.
Andy Carrier has only 2 keepers, but one is this 5.9-pound bass that takes over the Pro Division Big Bass lead. Right behind Carrier is Pete Winters, who has one that's even bigger, 6.35 pounds. When the third flight arrives, Brian Snowden moves into contention with 3 hefty bass that total 10.15 pounds. So does Bob Kaufman with the limit that weighs 10.55 pounds. Next is Howard McAllister. He has a limit that weighs in at 13.1 pounds to take over third place. Then Gary Carrier comes to the scales.
Uh-oh. What's leading the tournament?
$14.95.
Howard Buning, $14.95. Gone?
Today, not tomorrow, probably.
Oh, folks, looky here. Oh, looky here. And they still don't weigh as much as I thought they would. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Get your cameras ready. 16.60 pounds. Get them out of there. Ladies and gentlemen, that's your leader again in the Pro Division, Gary Carrier.
At the end of the first day, Gary Carrier sits atop the Lunker Lure Pro-Am scoreboard with 16.6 pounds. Howard Buning is in second place with 14.95 pounds, followed by Troy Akins, Howard McAllister, and Roger Fitzpatrick. In the rest of the top 10, it's close all the way, as Bob Kaufman leads the way in sixth place with 10.55 pounds, but he has an edge of less than a pound over Jimmy Davis, Brian Snowden, Lynn Sykes, and Dennis Dahlke. In the amateur division, Mason Chambers holds the Day 1 lead with 9.85 pounds. Steve Meitz holds down second place with 7.95 pounds, followed by Chuck Bridgewater, Steve Polk, and Jerry Hickey. In the rest of the top 10, J.R. Isom leads the way in sixth place with 5.3 pounds, but he has only a narrow lead over Mike Smith, Greg Gogger, Cliff Solward, and Gary Whiteley. Stay tuned for exciting Day 2 action. We'll be right back. Day 2, the Pro-Am anglers are greeted by another glorious summer day. But they know that heavy rains earlier in the week in the Truman watershed are beginning to raise the lake level. And Truman has a reputation for getting double tough when the water is rising. For the tournament leaders especially, this seems certain to be a day that will test their ability and their resolve. First day leader Gary Carrier is out with the first flight, and he's finding just what he was afraid he'd find. He didn't get many bites on day 1, fishing an 11-inch plastic worm around cedar trees, but the fish he caught were good ones. With conditions in a continuing state of flux, Carrier had been concerned that his fish might not stay put. Evidently, they haven't, because bites are even fewer than the day before. In fact, they're practically non-existent. However, Carrier is fishing as well as he ever has in his life right now, and he's found a way to be in contention in every Central Pro-Am tournament so far this year. If there's a way to hold on to his lead, Gary Carrier is certain to find it. There's nothing Troy Akins likes better than fishing a small brown jig in clear water around boat docks or ledge rock. Well, Truman doesn't have much clear water and not many boat docks, so Akins has done the best he can. He's working his small brown jig along ledges in the clearest water he can find, the bluffs right across from Truman Dam. So far, his plan is working because Akins and amateur partner Chris Beckman are among the few anglers catching bass consistently on Truman today. Unfortunately, many of them are small, and Akins knows he'll need bigger fish if he's to have a chance of overtaking Gary Carrier. Rick Scarberry was in 11th place after day 1, 7 pounds behind Carrier. But with Carrier struggling, Scarberry has a chance to win his first Central Pro-Am tournament if he can come in with a good catch today. So far, he's managed to get 3 keepers, but many of the fish he's catching are too short to keep. Finally, he gets a strike from a solid bass, but almost immediately it breaks free. And Scarberry knows that losing that fish could haunt him. Howard Buning won 2 tournaments as an amateur division competitor, but he's yet to win as a pro. He's come close before, but this is his best chance ever. He started the day in second place, less than 2 pounds behind the leader. With Carrier struggling, Buning should be in good position to overtake him. Unfortunately, Buning caught his 5 keepers on day 1 the same way Carrier did, and today his fish are not biting either. Unless they turn on later, Buning faces a very long day. Bob Kaufman is most comfortable when he has a flippin' stick in his hand, and this is one tournament in which that just may be the ticket. He already has 3 keepers, and if he can manage to come in with a limit, he could put himself in position to win his first Central Pro-Am tournament. By midday, Troy Akins has managed to land 3 keepers and is closing in on his limit. He's catching plenty of fish, but most of them continue to be too short to keep. However, he knows he's in an area that could produce the fish he needs to win his 3rd Central Pro-Am tournament, so he's not about to go looking anywhere else. When the Pro-Am anglers return to Bucksaw Point for the final weigh-in, David Spicer, who didn't have a keeper on day 1, suddenly jumps into contention.
Ooh, looky here, looky here. How many? 3 bass. Look at this. 12.75 pounds. Look at that, your new leader in the amateur division from Ozark, Missouri, David Spicer.
With fishing as tough as it is, no amateur competitor can come close to overtaking Spicer's lead. Finally, first day leader Mason Chambers comes to the scales.
The new leader in the amateur division, Mason Chambers, 16.05 pounds.
And Mason Chambers reigns as the amateur division winner. In the pro division, Bob Kaufman is one of the first to weigh in.
Look out, everybody. Look out. little bit better than yesterday. Yes, sir. 11. Whoops, let me do it again here. 12 pounds even. Mark it. Ladies and gentlemen, 22.55 pounds. Our new leader in the Pro Division, Bob Kaufman.
Mark Weezy had only 5.4 pounds on day one, but today he's got 4 bass that weigh just over 13 pounds. But it isn't enough to surpass Kaufman. Then comes first day leader, Gary Carrier.
16 something. It ain't gonna take you much to take the lead. How many you got?
I don't have much. I got 3.
Oh boy, I'll tell you what, you're right. Son, you didn't do it. I don't believe you did.
Then Howard Buning challenges Kaufman's lead.
4 bass, Howard Buning. He had yesterday 14.95 pounds. Oh, here we go. Oh, Wes, I gotta be sure on this one. Come in here and look with me, Wes. Come in here and look with me on this way. 7.30 pounds, mark it. Holy moly. Bob Kaufman stays alive, 22.25 pounds. Now that's second place.
Finally, it all comes down to Troy Aikens.
Here we go. Can't even mess with you, Bobby. 11.85 pounds.
It's official now. Troy Aikens wins his 3rd Pro-Am title with a 2-day total of 25.15 pounds. Right behind Aikens on the Lunker Lure Pro-Am scoreboard is Bob Kaufman with 22.55 pounds, with Howard Buning, Gary Carrier, and Rick Scarberry all less than a pound behind. In the rest of the top 10, it's just as tight. Brian Snowden finishes 6th with 20.65 pounds, followed by Mark Weezy, Roger Fitzpatrick, Jim Aikens, and Andy Carrier. In the amateur division, Mason Chambers wins his 1st Central Pro-Am title with a 2-day total of 16.05 pounds. Runner-up David Spicer is over 3 pounds back at 12.75 pounds, with Steve Meintz, David Boer, and Kyle Triplett rounding out the top 5. In the rest of the top 10, Sutton Berry leads the way in 6th place, followed by Jim K. Wood, Chuck Bridgewater, Steve Polk, and Jerry Hickey. Stay tuned for tournament winning tips from Troy Aikens. We'll be right back. Techniques you can use to catch more fish. Brought to you by Ranger Boats, where they still build them one at a time.
I caught all my fish on the bluffs, and the fish were anywhere from 2 to 15 foot deep, depending on what was on the bluff. The little cuts in the bluff is where the fish were out on the points on them. If there was a piece of standing timber there, the fish is usually at the base of at the timber, and he would be anywhere from, however deep the tree was. The bite was real subtle. I mean, you really have to pay attention. I had fish real slow, and I think that was really what the key was to me catching fish, is I just really slowed down and fished just as slow as I could. What I was doing is just pitching the jig up on the bank just as shallow as I could, and just as quiet as I could. And what I'd do is I just lifted about 6 inches and let it fall. And every once in a while I'd shake the jig, but I was fishing it real slow, just lifting it up and letting it fall. Lifting it up and letting it fall straight down on slack line. I didn't want it to come to me. I just wanted it to fall straight down the ledge. I caught my fish on 2 different jigs. I caught them on the Aikens flipping jig and the Aikens Pro Model jig. The Aikens flipping jig's a 3/8 ounce jig, and I caught them. I've used 15-pound Seaguar line on it. And Aikens Pro Model jig, I used 10-pound Seaguar line. When the bluff got to have a lot of timber on it and got real brushy, I'd go to the flipping jig, because a 10-pound line I didn't think I could get the fish out of the brush with. But the 15-pound line, I could get them out no problem. Congratulations to Troy Aikens on his hard-earned victory at Truman. He's now won 3 Central Pro-Am tournaments, and he just keeps getting better and better. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Fishin' Magazine television series.
The Fishin' Magazine television series is brought to you by Ranger Boats, where they still build them